Hi, I'm David Petersen, the creator of MouseGuard, and this is the second creator commentary for MouseGuard. Specifically, MouseGuard Issue 2, Shadows Within, which was later collected in the hardcover Fall 1152. For this issue and the remaining issues in Fall 1152, I'll be doing the commentary as audio only, but please feel free to follow along in your copy of the story in either issue form or the hardcover, as I talk about the behind-the-scenes details, art notes, and my headspace as I go page by page and panel by panel. First, some background on this issue. This was the first issue completed after signing up with Archaea as a publisher back in late 2005. But I had started work on this issue, fleshing out some story notes and illustrating the first several pages, when I still thought I'd be self-publishing this issue in black and white, as I had done for issue 1. Once Archaea agreed to publish in color, I stopped work on issue 2 so I could color all of issue 1, and then came back to this issue. Now on with the commentary. The cover of this issue is a wraparound, just like the issue before and actually every issue since. I watercolored this cover to match issue 1. Even though I was doing digital colors for the interiors, I decided that it should look exactly the same way that the cover to number 1 looked, so I watercolored this one. I did have to do some digital tweaking. The crab color, I tried to paint more the way crabs look when they're still in the ocean or in the sea, and alive, which they don't have that orangey color. That's what happens when they get cooked. But it just didn't read as well. It was muddy looking. I don't think it read as a crab. So digitally, I oranged it up a bit. Featured on the cover, we have Conrad, this crusty, drunken pirate as a guard mouse. Conrad started life as a sculpted character. I just started using some Sculpey. I already had some of my other guard mice sculpted at this point, but decided I was just going to have some fun with a new character. And I was having a really hard time getting 2 legs to match, sculpting 2 legs to match. And in frustration, after I had 1 leg that I liked and several scrapped versions of legs I didn't, I broke off the end of a paintbrush and I crammed it up inside of the thigh of the sculpture. There he's going to have a peg leg. I decided to rip part of his ear then and really make him kind of this grizzled, crusty mouse. Guy Davis is the person who actually named Conrad. I gifted Guy the sculpture and asked Guy if he would name him. I was going to include him in the next issue, and would Guy name him? And Guy said, well, I'll ask Rosemary, his girlfriend at the time, now fiance. I'll ask Rosemary to name him because I'd just name him something dumb like Conrad. And I said right on the spot, I like that name, I'm going to use that. So Guy Davis named this character. Guy actually still owns the original sculpture. And there he is front and center on the cover. Turning to the inside front cover, we see the title, Shadows Within. Now, at the time that I was doing Fall 1152, I didn't have that name, Fall 1152, as an overarching title for the series, so each issue was getting its own name. It was a little confusing. Some retailers and readers had a little issue with it, but that's what I was doing at the time. Now, the shadow here is referring to Midnight, and how he kind of takes the form of a shadow later in the issue, but we'll get to that when we get to those pages. The majority of the text here on the inside front cover is what I like to think of as like the opening crawl to Star Wars. It's a way to kind of frame the issue, give the reader some information about what happened before and what's about to happen. And the text reveals that this story is supposed to be taking place simultaneously to the events in issue 1. It also introduces Sadie as a character. Sadie was a character that I had developed to be very independent. Where Saxon, Kenzie, and Liam were together as a patrol, Sadie was a character that goes out on patrol alone. And here her mission is revealed to find out why no one has heard from Conrad. And at the bottom of the page, we get the quote, "Send any mouse to do the job, it may or may not be done. Ask the guard to do the task, even death cannot prevent it from completion." That saying is supposed to kind of work in two ways. One, to imply that guard mice can do work from beyond the grave in a kind of supernatural way, but also in a more practical way, that because the guard is this ever-growing organization and fraternity, that another guard will step up and take the role and continue and finish the job. And as a visual, the spot illustration introduces Sadie, and her shadow is supposed to be kind of a subtle crab claw that I stippled in, foreshadowing what's going to be happening later in the issue. Page 1. I started working on this issue before I even met with Mark Smiley and Archaea agreed to publish Mouse Guard. Jeremy Bastian and I were at Motor City Comic Con at the place where I self-published and released the first issue of Mouse Guard in black and white. And we were sitting there thinking about what I could do as a follow-up. What would be the second issue? And we were joking around about, like Mouse Guard goes to the beach. But suddenly that turned into these cool ideas about mice versus lobsters or crabs. And that's kind of where the genesis of this issue came from. In panel 1, I have the nature motif as the opening panel that serves as a open space for the title. Kind of inspired here by Japanese woodblock prints of nature. In panel 2, we have Sadie walking with her face kind of blocked and kind of small in size. But it's not the greatest first glance of Sadie, but I wanted to have her already intensely in her mission. And by pulling back, I remind the reader of scale. For the third panel, for that note, I actually used a font. I didn't just do that by hand, but I typed up the letter, dropped it at an angle into my rough, and then when I printed out my rough, I was able to hand ink it and kind of distress the text so that it still looks hand-lettered. Panel 4, the leaf boat. This was something I had envisioned mice using since I thought of Mouse Guard. This one being kind of tied up like this implies that maybe this is one that Sadie reuses, but I like the idea that the leaf boats are more of an improvised transport, that there's an art to finding the right leaf, sealing it with candle wax, maybe shaping it in some way so that it will support and be buoyant with a mouse inside of it. Page 2, we get the splash page of Sadie and her leaf boat. I regret selling the original of this page. Julia wanted it, and she kind of mentioned that she liked it, but she didn't specifically say, hey, let's not put that one up for sale. And then when it sold, she was disappointed. She didn't realize that this one was going to someone else. I've since reconnected with the couple that owns it. They are very happy with it. They're sad that Julia's sad, but at the same time, they love the piece. So I know it went to a good home, but I still occasionally will catch hell for selling this page. I also regret having Sadie travel from right to left. I don't know why I did that. There's kind of a subconscious story note when you have characters go from right to left, that they're somehow going back, that they're returning, and that the proper direction is from left to right. And lastly, on this page, when I was coloring it, the color holds were really hard for me. All the blue of the water, all of the ink lines that are blue, all of the ink lines that I turned blue for the water, versus all the hatching of the leaf being green. And that was a real struggle when I was only 2 issues into professionally coloring a comic book. For page 3, I'm shifting the camera angles and shots for a 3-panel page. The top panel is still that right to left direction issue, but I pulled back for a sense of scale and to kind of show the current and the rocks, implying all this danger for Sadie, that this isn't just a Sunday stroll paddling down the river. When you're a mouse, that's a dangerous task. The middle panel, a close-up. I'd probably crop that better now if I had the chance, but the focus here is to show the work and the effort that Sadie's having to do a lot of maneuvering to manage this boat down the river. And then the last panel opening up, showing this big nature shot of the river arriving at the sea. And in this panel, both Sadie and the Leaf Boat are just negative space in the water inks. I just neglected to ink them to leave a little white spot that I could color in. Page 4, the top panel, Sadie is now coming ashore. I had the decision to not have her just pop out onto open beach. Part of that was because I wanted her to be less exposed. I wanted her to be strategic about where she would bring her boat ashore and not be in danger. But I also needed to give her access to the tree in panel 2, and I thought it'd be more probable that she would find a tree somewhere that there was grass rather than someplace where it was open beach. Panel 2, for that tree, I found a little stone sitting on the open spot of a tree's knot hole by my house. And when I walked by it, it made me think, like, what's hiding in there? Somebody put something in there underneath that rock, and they're trying to protect it. And it gave me the idea that would be a great way for mice to kind of make sure that their notes and letters and things like that don't blow away. Panel 3 confirms that Conrad hasn't been getting these messages. Now, who delivered these is something that I've been asked and I sometimes think about. Trained birds and insects is one thought, but I actually kind of prefer that guard mice who are on patrol, who might be going near Calligaro but don't have the time to go all the way out to the outpost, might very easily just drop a scroll into a knot hole and leave the note for Conrad. Page 5 is a rotated layout of page 4. That's something that I like to do on facing pages, either rotate them or mirror them. I collected reference for these grass and sand pages while visiting Buttersville Beach, which is just south of Ludington on Lake Michigan. It's a place that I vacationed as a child, and I actually proposed to Julia on that beach. And also an art note here, the decision to have all that sand stippling color held was quite the endeavor. Color hold means that the ink lines display as a color rather than black ink. And isolating all of that sand stippling so that I could make it look sandier was quite the trick. Panel 1 here, Sadie mentions Conrad's peg leg. I'll get back to that in a few pages. And skipping ahead to panel 3, I like the idea that we have a page turn after mentioning Calligaro so that the reveal builds suspense. And there on page 6, we have the Calligaro reveal. I based this structure on a storybook stone cottage in Blaze Hamlet near Bristol, England, that was built by John Nash. My original notes for the Calligaro outpost were to make them like the tower that's shown in Hellboy the Iron Shoes story. I did do some modification from the original reference and decided to offset the kind of central column version of John Nash's building and make it this kind of cobbled together series of cylinders that are stacked on top of each other. Later, I reused this architectural style and kind of retconned in a story for why there is only a single dwelling like this on the beach at Calligaro, and implied that Calligaro was part of a larger group, a community of several buildings, and that can be found in Legends Volume 3 as one of the covers. Page 7. The interior of Calligaro here is dark for mood, but it's also dark because I had no idea what the interior of this looked like. This is before I was using architectural models of my own as reference, so knowing what the inside of this building looked like was something that was beyond me at that time. On panel 1, we have Sadie thinking that the place might be abandoned. In panel 2, I added the map because somehow I thought that this would answer a question for the reader, that Sadie's in the right place. It's the first time I ever drew the map of the territories when I drew this issue, and I did it right on the page, and it ends up being very different from how it shows up in the later version, in later issues, and then also the one that I created for the collection. Panel 3. Because of the dialogue Sadie has a few pages back about the peg leg, the reader now knows that this is Conrad. There's a part of me that wished I'd kept that as more of a reveal, but since he's also on the cover with a peg leg, I don't know that I've ever could have made it a reveal without also changing the cover. Notice there's cuts and scratches on his remaining leg, and that's because I wanted to show that this is a mouse that has scars. This is a crusty pirate. Page 8, we have the full Conrad reveal. My original notes say, sword to Sadie's nose, but then I scratched out the word sword and replaced it with hook. Foolishly, I never thought of that hook as being a human fish hook, which a lot of fans did. And unfortunately, it was something that I really regret, because there are no humans in the world of Mouse Guard. I never want the reader to think that just over the next sand dune, just beyond that group of trees, could be modern human society, or even medieval human society. Humans just don't exist in this world, and I really regret that fishhook. I tried to kind of retcon it so that it was a bent harpoon when I did the Black Axe series, where we see a younger version of Conrad, and he has a straightened hook, or a straightened harpoon that ends up getting all tangled up and more in a hook shape to try to explain away how much this looks like a human fishhook. In panel 2, I'm trying to write something a little bit piratey into the accent with the yeah and yer in the dialogue, although I think throughout the issue I'm a little inconsistent with it. Page 9, Sadie shows her backbone and courage here. There's no fear when she gives her order to Conrad to stand down. Putting Conrad in silhouette here was me playing visually, but it's sort of pointless. We've already seen him, and visually it's a little muddy since a shadowy figure ends up becoming a plot point in a few pages, and it's not Conrad. So the only purpose I can think of that makes this work is to show how a mouse can kind of disappear in the shadows here, and it also gives more of a focus to Sadie in this panel. Panel 2. Right away, we have the use of Gwendolyn's name being used, that it gets an immediate reaction from Conrad to actually stand down. We also get a view of that map, a better view of the map, which I ended up having to incorporate into the final map because I was making this up as I went, and I had to kind of incorporate what I had already drawn on the fly into a final version. The cross-rigging here between the joists of the roof, I added in later with whiteout because I had forgotten to draw them in. And ultimately the line here about the traitor is getting to the real meat and twist of the tale. Page 10. In panels 1 through 3, we have these animation-style panels where the background doesn't really change much, but the character moves. And Conrad's passing out here. Is it because he's exhausted, ill, drunk, hungover? Probably yes to all of those things. And in the last panel, we have Conrad flat on his back on the floor and Sadie watching over him. Page 11 is a 180-degree rotation from the layout of the facing page, page 10. And in panel 1, this was my first time trying to color with some real lighting effects. I definitely do it differently now, but I'm still happy that I took a chance and tried something a little different here. Why did I have Conrad pass out? Was it to add a few more pages in? Was it to keep the reader into suspense? Maybe it was just something I thought would be interesting. Maybe I thought it would add to his character as a drunk, but more, I think, it was because it gave me a chance to make Conrad a bit of an unreliable narrator as he's about to tell a tale. Panel 3, Sadie's dialogue already is calling Conrad's tale into question by putting traitor in quotes. And last note, in panel 4, Notice the portrait over the mantle? Well, Jeremy Bastian had already done his pinup for issue 6, which is where that portrait comes from. While the portrait is featured in Gwendolyn's office later in issue 6 and plays a major plot point there, I started by putting it in here. I didn't know I was going to do that in issue 6. My earliest notes have Conrad as some kind of like Padawan to Kellinaw, so I wanted there to be a connection. And this portrait being there is the foundation for that, but also for something coming up. Page 12, an unusual 4-panel page for me, and the next one echoes that as well. And the flashback tale of Conrad begins. Now, all the line work in these flashbacks is faded out with a dark brown color hold over the black inks. In panel 2, we get the return of the grain merchant from issue 1. But this is obviously before those events. And in panel 3, spoiler here, this is Midnight's reveal, but he's never actually seen. He's always in shadow. The line, "They spoke of the dead," is something that I think goes over most people's heads, and I'm sure. But I had a specific idea when I wrote it. Now, later we know that Midnight is explaining here his plan to organize an army. And we know that he's going to use the weapon of the Black Axe as an instrument or symbol of unification. Conrad, who knows who the Black Axe was and is, and knows that Kellinaw is dead in his mind. This is why when Conrad hears Black Axe, he thinks they're talking about the dead. Even when I wrote this back in issue 2, I knew that those events would culminate at the end of the Black Axe book. Sometimes these long payoff connections are really kind of retconned in or figured out on the fly, but this is one that I had from the very beginning. In panel 4, we have Conrad tied up in the rafters. Now, how long does he stay lashed up there? Maybe that's more reason for why he passed out. I was really worried about the rum XXX on the jug. Now, issue 1 of Mouseguard was endorsed by so many kid-friendly sites and reviewers, especially one called Comics in the Classroom. We had used one of their quotes to advertise and solicit this issue. It made me seriously worry about having Conrad being a drunk, and having this kind of blatant alcohol reference. I debated changing it. I really mulled it over and ultimately went with my gut and my original concept, that I wasn't showing that behavior as being something fruitful or rewarding, and that ultimately in the long run it was a pretty tame thing. Page 13, the handoff of the map from Midnight to the grain merchant, then leading right up to the moment that Sadie arrived. Now, does this mean that this all probably happens before issue 1, if Sadie could have passed the merchant? Possibly. I also like to give a little bit of wiggle room because Conrad is an unreliable narrator, and we don't know how much time actually passed. How long was he up in those rafters? Did he fall asleep for a few days? Or did he come down immediately after the merchant left? Panel 4, we come out of the flashback story to a panel that feels like a break in any good RPG session. Gonna take a night's rest and leave at first light. On page 14, Sadie is waking up to realize that it's past first light, when Sadie wanted to leave, but it's still dark inside, and something is making it too dark, blocking the exits. And for panel 4, I tried kind of an advanced coloring technique of making the mice look like they're behind the glass. I did that by doing a color hold on all of the ink lines of the mice, everything that's inside, and then dropping shadows across the mice that would come from the leading in the window. Page 15, the re-reveal of Caligaro, now covered in crabs. I did have reference when I was drawing these crabs. Julia went to a seafood market for me to get the crab, and there were only 2 ways that you could get crab there. Either live or cooked, but the cooked were already separated. They were not whole crab, they were pieces. She explained that she needed a cooked version, one no longer living, but that was still whole. And I forget what they asked, some kind of question about why would you need that? And her response was, "My husband's an artist." It took a few days for the crabs to come in. But we got 2 whole crabs that had already been cooked, and on our kitchen countertop, we posed them in different positions and took turns taking digital photos of them from every possible angle and articulating as much of the legs and of the claws as we could so that I had ample reference, so that no matter what came up in this issue, I should be able to figure out how to draw it. Now, in story terms, why are these crabs attacking Caligaro? I never specified really if this was a natural predator behavior or something like that, or, and I kind of prefer this idea, that Midnight had chummed the dwelling. He had put something on it to attract the crabs in order to destroy the building, just in case anybody was listening, or to destroy any evidence. Maybe he knew Conrad was there all along. Page 16, panel 1. Here I want to establish that the crabs aren't just staying outside. They are ripping the doors off. They are trying to get at what's inside. And that they are strong. In panel 2, the original script and outline called for Conrad and Sadie to escape via a secret hatch. But on page 17 in panel 1, I hadn't drawn anything like a hatch that they could escape from, so I had them just pop out through the thatching of the roof. Getting to draw that crab coming around the corner of the roof was a lot of fun. It was like drawing a monster movie. And in panel 2, here's a place where silhouettes actually kind of work, because it focuses the reader on the crabs. And we begin that crab fight. Page 18. Here I was stuck. The notes just said they battle their way through the crabs on the beach. This meant I had 5 pages to fill of this kind of thing, but I had no details. I had no notes for what the choreography would be, if there were any major events or character twists, nothing. I woke up one morning after struggling with what to do next, with a complete battle in my head. This page consists of Conrad's Luke Skywalker AT-AT takedown. Step 1, attach the grappling hook to 1. And then on page 19, in a modification of not having a snow speeder like Luke did, tie the other end of the line to the next AT-AT, or crab, and that one crab would then topple the other and drag it on its back. The panel layout of this page is also the mirror of the previous. Page 20, we're back to Sadie. In panels 1 through 3, a tossed dagger tinks off of the crab shell and leads the readers to believe that Sadie has failed. But panel 4, Sadie uses the crab's distraction in picking up that dagger to get the stab in on the underbelly. Page 21 is again a mirror of the previous page's panel layout. And in panel 1, this plan has now backfired on Sadie. Her stabbing dagger is now stuck. So panels 2 through 4, she's trying to get the thrown dagger out of the crab's claw. But it lifts her up in the air. And at the last moment, she's able to grab the dagger with her tail when the crab's claw opens. You can see how useful the crab reference was on a lot of these pages, because there's no way that internet searches were going to get me the kind of close-ups and angles and details of crab anatomy that I could get by having an actual crab and taking all the photo reference myself. Page 22, panel 1. I needed Sadie to be thrown clear here. I needed her out of the fight for a moment. The original outline did not have Conrad's fate determined, but as I was drawing these pages, I decided what I needed to do. In panels 2 through 3 on this page, Conrad does his brave, heroic last deed. Page 23, panel 1. Giving Sadie the time to run and get away from an unwinnable fight is that deed, is Conrad's moment. On panel 2, he pays the ultimate price for that moment with his life. It's a decision that I made to let the reader know that mouse life is brutal, and that I wasn't afraid as a creator to let mice die. And it showed that Conrad, as an unreliable narrator, believed in the traitor theory enough that he was willing to give his own life for it. And in panel 3, Sadie's tearful retreat, hoping that she will still be able to make a difference with the information she now has. And in that tiny lettering, she whispers a goodbye for us all to Conrad. Page 24 in the issue, or you can flip to the back of the hardcover, is Guy Davis's second pinup. Since Guy named Conrad, I felt it was fitting to ask him to do the pinup for the issue. It's done in pen and gray marker. Guy had mentioned at the time doing it all in kind of a blue tone, similar to something he had done for Humanoids, the French magazine, around that same time. And since the book was going to be in color, it would have worked, unlike when he did pinup number 1 and it had to be grayscale. But ultimately he decided against it and didn't even really want to digitally adjust it to make it that kind of blue. He liked it in gray, and I think it looks great. And that crab is terrifying coming down on Conrad. That is the second issue of Mouse Guard. It's been collected in fall 1152, published by Archaea. If you've enjoyed this commentary, please leave comments in the section below. Let me know what I didn't answer for you in this issue, and subscribe for updates when I add more Mouse Guard commentary. Thank you for listening.